Here in the U.S., we've mostly imported the spirits and legends of our ancestors. But one uniquely American figure continues to fascinate and create new myths: the Mothman. Hey folks, this is James, aka Threskiornis, here with a video that I promised you a few weeks back. I've decided to do this now in preparation for the Starwood Festival, where the Order of Emergent Magi will be doing a Mothman invocation. Of course, I'll be the one giving the history and the background for the ritual. So I've decided to share it with you good folks here on my YouTube channel. So let's get started with the history of the event, and then we'll talk about how it relates to magic and those who use it. It's hard to find a good place to start. As anyone who has read the Mothman Prophecies by John Keel knows, there's a lot more to this than just the Mothman himself. Keel describes a plethora of events that point towards that region of West Virginia and southeastern Ohio as a hotbed of strange paranormal activity at that time. It's what he calls a UFO flap, or just a flap, alluding to some kind of opening in reality that predicates these phenomena. The events surrounding the Mothman incident in Point Pleasant are fascinating, even if you don't subscribe to a paranormal or spiritual explanation for them. The sheer variety of reports by witnesses, their frequency, and their localized nature points to, at the very least, some kind of highly strange mass hysteria, all of which comes crashing down, literally, with the Silver Bridge collapse in December of 1967. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Perhaps the first strange encounter of the collective event occurred 13 days before the first reported sighting of the Mothman, when a man named Woodrow Darrenberger experienced an unusual traffic stop. Woody was driving past Parkersburg, West Virginia, when his car was overtaken by a flying object, which he described as looking like an old-fashioned kerosene lamp chimney, flaring at both ends, narrowing down to a small neck and then enlarging into a great bulge in the center. To make it even weirder, the craft descended in front of his car, and a being came out, described by Darrenberger. His face looked like he had a good tan, a deep suntan. He was not too dark, but it was just like he had been out in the sun a lot and had a good tan. His hair was combed straight back, and it was a dark brown, and he seemed to have a good thick head of hair. His eyebrows, his face, his features were very normal. I don't believe that he looked any different from any other man that you would meet on the street. The being communicated with Woody telepathically, telling him, "Don't be frightened. We wish you no harm. We wish you only happiness." The being said his name was Cold. He asked Woody some fairly basic questions about the area and then promised to visit Darrenberger again. Woody went to the police with the story, and witnesses came forward to confirm they saw Woody's car parked along the highway, and he was talking to a strange man outside the car. This set off a media frenzy, and people from the surrounding area descended on Darrenberger's property, hoping to catch a glimpse of the returning visitor. No one is said to have witnessed a visit from Cold or his craft, but Darrenberger and his family would maintain that they were visited often. Darrenberger would go on to write a book about his experiences, saying that Cold and his crew would visit him in disguise, sometimes just driving up to his home in a Volkswagen. Woody would later learn the visitor's first name, which was Indrid, the names of his crew, some of which included members of Cold's family. Darrenberger also claimed to have been taken to Indrid Cold's home planet of Lanulos. Woody's daughter, Tanya, would go on to write books of her own about her families and her own encounters with Cold and his people. In one book, she alludes to the idea that Indrid Cold and Valiant Thor may be the same person. but that's a rabbit hole for another video. The entire area experienced a massive amount of UFO sightings before and during the Mothman incident. So many that a friend and colleague of John Keel, Mary Heyer, a reporter for the Athens, Ohio Register, said that there were more reports than she was able to print. Also reported by Heyer and others were encounters with persons or entities known as men in black, people with strange appearance and mannerisms that would sometimes harass UFO witnesses. Some claimed to be from the government, but seemed to have little knowledge of military or government agencies and procedures. But all of that pales to the frenzy inspired by two couples from Point Pleasant, Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallett. The couples claimed that while driving by an abandoned munitions factory and storage facility on November 15, 1966, a place later to be dubbed the TNT area, they saw a pair of large red glowing eyes. When it moved into the illumination of their headlights, they said they saw a man-shaped gray being with large wings. They drove off, only to see the creature again next to a billboard further up the road. The creature then began to follow their car, and the couples all attested to driving over 100 miles per hour to escape the creature. All said that the creature swooped down and hit the top of their car while making loud squeaking noises like a huge mouse. It gets even weirder as the couple stopped at a local gas station to discuss what they should do. Thinking they would be labeled as liars or drunks, they decided to go home, a route which would take them back in the direction they came. On the way, they discovered a dead dog on the side of the road, and when they stopped to examine it, saw what they assumed was the same creature lurking in a nearby field. That was enough for the couple, and they decided to go to the police. The police went out to investigate, finding little, but saying their radios produced strange interference, a theme that would continue throughout the incident, as many experienced weird phone calls and radio disruptions during the incident. Apparently, they thought something was happening, as the police held a press conference about the sighting the next day. The rest is history. Legions of locals and people from far and wide descended upon the TNT area, hoping to get a glimpse of the Mothman. Some brought firearms to hunt the cryptid. From November 15th until December 15th the following year, there were over 40 reported sightings of the Mothman. That doesn't include the numerous UFO reports, encounters with men in black, unexplained phone calls, many of which were described as static and beeping noises. Something which, for someone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, sounds like a description of a modem connection. The Scarberrys would go on to claim that they experienced poltergeist activity in their home after seeing the Mothman. This went on until December 15, 1967. On that day, the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, a span that crosses the Ohio River, collapsed, plunging cars and people into the river below, resulting in 46 deaths. As far as my research shows, the highest death toll of any auto bridge disaster in world history. A few reports of paranormal activity were made after the tragedy, but for the most part, it ceased as the people of Point Pleasant mourned. The collapse gave the Mothman a reputation as a harbinger of doom, which may not be a good sign for the people of northern Illinois, who have been experiencing Mothman sightings for several years now, with over 55 sightings in 2017 alone. The so-called Chicago Mothman seems to have expanded his territory, including parts of northern Indiana and more than one sighting in Rockford, Illinois, the hometown of emergent magic. So we once again get to the part of the video where I hope you're asking yourself important questions, like, what the hell does this have to do with magic? To start, I think magicians can learn a lot from the philosophy of John Keel. As a paranormal researcher, Keel throws out a lot of theories, but ultimately shies away from naming the source or exact nature of what he is studying. For him, it is simply the phenomenon. And he does a good job at poking holes in the popular explanations, like the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Keel is pretty certain it's not all things from outer space. He's certain of this because he goes to great lengths to compare modern UFO and cryptid sightings with religious and mythological lore and comes up with some surprising commonalities. In Keel's view, some intelligent force is communicating with humanity and using forms and ideas that would resonate with the culture of that time and place. What if we as magicians just called our interactions with the spirits and magic the phenomenon? No judgment calls, no assumptions about who or what we are talking to. Everything received is pure speculation. This perspective would be difficult for magicians. We thrive on tradition. We thrive on meaning. And more than a few of us are arrogant enough to believe that we know what is going on. But we can shift our perspectives. We can look at the fruits of our magic both within the context of the tradition that created it and still admit to ourselves we really have no idea what's going on. I know some of you true devotees are yelling at me now. I know I'm talking to my deity. But do you really know? Is it not possible this entity that you've been communicating with all along has been lying to you? Is it not possible that it really isn't anything like you imagined? I, for one, cannot say with 100% certainty that the being I am communicating with is Thoth, if Thoth ever existed, and if it even understands that symbolism. But I have experienced things, and if I can keep making that happen by calling it Thoth, that's what I'm going to do. In the end, I'm 99% certain that's my guy. Too many clues say so, but I would never claim to have proof. In addition, while we come to grips with issues of cultural appropriation, isn't it highly appealing to work with a homegrown modern mythology? For folks in the U.S., there is no doubt that the Mothman is a uniquely American legend, especially for those of us who hail from the Midwest. While we complain about the dearth of our own spiritual traditions, which drives us to explore others, here we have a local spirit perfectly suited for exploration. As I can personally attest to after attending and performing multiple rituals with the goal of contacting the Mothman. Well, I think we have the makings of another playlist here, where I'm going to discuss topics of cryptids and the paranormal. But for now, you can check out my original video on the paranormal and the occult. So I think it's obvious by now that the Mothman is kind of special to the Order of Emergent Magi. So much so that one of our founders, the mighty Zentra L, has opened an occult bookstore called the Moth Emporium. So if you're ever in the Rockford area, stop by, have a chat with him about Mothman or magic. That's located in the McPherson building, which is a home for artists to sell their wares. It also has Rockford Record Company and Alive Again Vintage. We hope later this year to bring you footage from our Mothman cam located on the roof of the McPherson. With it being right next to the Morgan Street Bridge, it's the perfect place for Mothman spotting. So if cryptids and UFOs and other paranormal subjects are your jam, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget, we're going to Egypt in November, and we have a Ko-Fi campaign for fundraising. We could really use your help with expenses that we're going to have in country. Of course, you could also go over to our Redbubble store, find our Scroll of Thoth merchandise. I hope to see some of you out at Starwood. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.